Sleep Awake is a game that doesn't simply want to be played, it wants to be experienced, interpreted, and in some ways endured. From the very beginning, it positions you inside a world that feels like a half remembered dream, vague, shifting, and quietly unstable. Sleepawake's greatest strength emerges immediately its atmosphere. Every environment feels liminal, neither fully real nor fully imagined. Rooms blur at the edges, hallways subtly distort themselves, and shadows behave in ways that never let you anchor yourself. The game constructs a mood of permanent dislocation, a sense of drifting between consciousness and something less defined. This is where the game's identity is clearest. It knows how to evoke the uncanny through subtle distortion rather than cheap tricks. The world feels uncomfortable because it feels unstable, and Sleep Awake uses that instability as the core of its tone. But mood alone can't carry an entire experience, and Sleep Awake quickly reveals the consequences of its design choices. The game relies heavily on narrative fragmentation. Memories presented out of order, events repeated with slight differences, objects that appear symbolic without ever being clearly interpreted. You're presented with fragments of guilt, glimpses of relationships, implications of trauma, but rarely are these threads tied together. The game speaks in metaphor, but often refuses to clarify what the metaphor is pointing toward. For some players, this ambiguity will feel rich and ripe for interpretation. For others, it may feel evasive and underdeveloped. The narrative is constructed from pieces, and the game expects you to build meaning out of the scattered debris. Sleep Awake trusts the player to interpret symbolism, but sometimes that trust feels like an excuse not to commit to clarity. The game wants to provoke emotion, but it rarely provides enough structure to sustain that emotion. Instead, it offers mood, then more mood, and then another layer of mood on top of that. For better and for worse, this is the game's signature choice tone over explanation. Mechanically, Sleep Awake is extremely minimal. You walk, you observe, you engage with environmental objects, and occasionally you solve puzzles. These puzzles are not particularly complex, nor do they escalate into anything dramatic. They function more as pacing breaks, brief tasks that interrupt long stretches of atmospheric traversal. When the game does introduce more elaborate dreamlike transitions, such as looping rooms, shifting architecture, or distorted perspectives, it reaches its highest moments. These sequences feel inspired, unsettling, and carefully crafted. However, large portions of the experience fall into monotony. You move slowly through long, sparsely interactive environments, often without narrative or mechanical payoff. The game clearly intends these quiet stretches to feel meditative or suffocating, but too often they slip into outright stagnation. Dream logic is a powerful tool, but only when it carries emotional or thematic weight. Sleep Awake sometimes uses it simply because it can, not because it should. The theme of sleeplessness runs beneath everything an inability to distinguish waking from dreaming, memory from imagination, reflection from repetition. The game touches on the slow erosion of identity, the way exhaustion distorts perception, and the fear of losing oneself in the liminal gap between who you were and who you assume yourself to be. These ideas are compelling, but the game doesn't develop them with enough consistency to make them resonate deeply. The protagonist remains a blurred figure. You learn about them through implication rather than revelation. The emotional core is present but never fully exposed. You can sense the pain, the confusion, and the unresolved past, but the game rarely allows you to grasp these elements clearly enough to feel invested in them. There is a deliberate emotional distance embedded in the writing, and while distance can be effective, here it often veers into detachment. Aesthetically, the game excels. Its visual identity is precise, harsh lighting, unnervingly empty rooms, textures that feel like decaying memories, and transitions that subtly shift your perception of the space. The sound design uses whispers, drones, and environmental distortion to reinforce the sense that everything you hear is happening a layer removed from reality. The presentation is polished, confident, and meticulously designed to keep you off balance. Where Sleep Awake struggles most is pacing. The game moves slowly, sometimes painfully so. There are stretches where nothing meaningful happens, where the only progression is walking from one ambiguous room to another without gaining new insight or new tension. These lulls undermine the impact of the stronger sequences. The lack of narrative momentum makes the game feel longer than it needs to be, and not in a way that strengthens the overall experience. Sleep Awake is a game built around themes of disorientation, anxiety, and internal conflict. It wants to be an introspective journey through a fractured mind, but introspection requires direction, and Sleep Awake rarely provides enough structure to guide the player's engagement. Instead, it leans so heavily into ambiguity that it loses the opportunity to create deeper emotional connection. Players who appreciate interpretive narrative experiences will find Sleep Awake intriguing. Those who enjoy slow, atmospheric exploration and symbolic storytelling will be able to immerse themselves in the game's quiet dread. But if you prefer clarity, mechanical depth, narrative payoff, or consistent pacing, Sleep Awake will likely feel underwhelming. It is a game defined as much by what it withholds as by what it delivers. In the end, Sleep Awake is a thoughtful but uneven experience. Its atmosphere is compelling, its aesthetic coherence is impressive, and its ambition is clear, but the execution is inconsistent. There are moments of brilliance, but they are separated by long stretches of emptiness. There is thematic potential, but it is never fully realized. The game reaches for emotional resonance, but often feels too distant and diffuse to achieve it. Sleep Awake is memorable, but not always for the right reasons. It is intriguing, but not consistently engaging. It is well crafted in tone, but lacking in narrative and mechanical cohesion. My final score is 6 out of 10. If you enjoyed this review, leave a like and subscribe for more gaming reviews. See you next time.